Hello and welcome. If you're new here, my name is Joe, and I rant about the things that I think we need to do to prepare for the coming effects of climate change. If you've been here before, welcome back. In this video, I'll be talking about what you can do right now about climate change. Now, climate change is a very overwhelming topic because it's such a global issue, and climate refers to long-term change, which I think is part of the problem. So I think the two things that people can do right now is, number one, understand what climate change actually is, and then number two, I'll get into some actions that you can do about it. So number one, in terms of just understanding what climate change actually is, I think there are two things working against the name climate change. First is the word climate. Now, we used to refer to this as global warming. That's a bit misleading because it's not just about temperature change. It's also about changes in precipitation patterns. So climate change is actually more accurate because that is what is changing. But the word climate refers to long-term averages, long-term prevailing conditions in a particular region. And I think what that does is give people a false sense of security that, well, if this is a long-term thing, doesn't that mean we have a long time to fix it? If a doctor came to you and said, hey, if you don't stop eating chocolate right now, you're going to die in 30 years. Would you stop eating chocolate, or would you be like, well, even if that's true, that's a lot of chocolate I could eat in those 30 years, and it might be worth it. Plus, 30 years from now, won't medical technology be different? Like, maybe you're wrong. So, even if you are right, you're talking about something that's so far off, and I have to sacrifice something that I really don't want to the entire time until then? No, I'm just going to keep eating the chocolate, thanks. So when you talk about climate change and what to do about it, I think the word climate gives people the idea that we have a lot of time to do something about this, and we don't. The reason is climate is the historical record. Climate is describing what has already happened. I think what's more accurate is it's not so much climate change, it's weather change. Weather is the day-to-day conditions you experience at any particular place. So the average high temperature, for example, at your location on today's date is just the last 30 high temperatures on today's date at your location, all averaged together. Climate is the weather. It's the average, or it's the historical record of the weather. And that's what's changing. The weather is changing. So when we talk about it from the perspective of climate, it takes a lot of weather change to then change climatological averages. So we have it backwards. Climate makes it sound like it's not so bad because when we talk about the numbers involved, oh, temperature has increased 1 degree here, half a degree there, 2 degrees here in the last 30 years. Some people might also misinterpret that as, well, so what? As I've gotten older, I don't like the cold so much anymore. So a couple degrees warmer, that's fine by me. And especially in the wintertime, doesn't that mean it's going to cut down on my heating bills? Like, isn't this a good thing? It's absolutely a terrible thing that the climate is changing. Climate involves more than just temperature and precipitation because what kind of temperature conditions that an area experiences and how much precipitation and in what form and when. I mean, some areas get a little bit of rain consistently. Some areas get a lot of rain all at once and then nothing for a while. That determines what kind of plant life can exist there, what kind of animals can survive there, what kinds of insects you'll find, what kind of bacteria and microscopic organisms, what kind of food you can grow there. When the climate is changing, that's going to impact what kind of plants you can find, and it's going to cause all these things to move around. The only species on the planet that observes political boundaries are human beings. Trees are going to grow wherever the conditions are right for them to grow. Animals are going to go wherever their food source goes, and then on up the food chain. So things are going to move around, and people are not going to be able to. If you think we have a migrant problem now, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, there are going to be refugees all over the planet because of climate change. We have to take action now to prevent these things down the road. So when we talk about the weather has changed so much that it's changed the climatological averages, that's what's sounding the alarm bells. But the general public doesn't see it that way. I believe they're like, well, the climate's changing, but that doesn't mean the weather's changing, does it? It means exactly that. The weather has changed so much, so consistently. And also for the worse. It's not like it's getting more comfortable in more places. It's getting warmer and more humid in more places, which means it's getting drier in other places. And this is what we're seeing in terms of wildfires, the spreading of diseases that are killing trees, and it's going to make it harder to grow crops in the future in certain areas because, for example, the lifespan of a tree could be 50 years, 80 years, whatever it is. If the time that tree first sprouted, the conditions were perfect for that species, the time it's dropping acorns decades later, or other kinds of nuts, maybe the conditions have changed where those trees can no longer survive, such that the tree itself is now at risk of dying off because of some bacteria or fungus that has moved in. Same thing with the animals. I mean, as they move around, as their predators move around, anything that impacts the food chain impacts us. So you have to understand climate change is a really big deal. It's a change in nature. Nature is changing. And the thing about those who are trying to tell us about it, those who are sounding the alarm, the climate scientists, it's easy for politicians to dismiss them as alarmists because this is alarming. But when someone is just screaming, hey, the house is on fire and you can't escape because leaving means going into space, so we're all trapped in the same house and it's on fire, by the way, like, what are you supposed to do with this information? You're just like, I don't want to hear this anymore. Everything's fine. Everything's going to be okay. There's a plan. I just know it, that things are going to work out. And politicians latch onto this because climate change is a threat to capitalism. 500 years ago, the enemy of science was religion because religion had all the power. Today, the enemy of science is capitalism because the notion of the way we've profiteered off of each other, this predatory profiteering mindset that we've used for the last several hundred years, is why the climate is changing. It's why the earth is so polluted, because that's been the most profitable way to do things. So climate change is a risk to those in power, and so they want to spread misinformation. They don't want you to know what's happening. They either want to shine a light on the extremists. I call them extremists, but they're not inaccurate. They are going about it in a way that makes it sound scary, because it is scary, but it gives politicians a door to exploit, to say, well, we got this under control. It's nowhere near as bad as they're saying, because that's what people want to hear. They want to hear that things are going to be fine. They're not going to be fine. There's some really rough days ahead. So now let's get to, what can you do about it? Well, other than being informed and being aware that climate change it really refers to weather change, it refers to changes in nature, and it will be a threat to all of us down the road, and it's just making things worse and worse for future generations if we don't act right now. Now, part two is each one of us individually can't really do a whole lot to personally change the weather back. But what we can do is make changes with our pocketbooks. So what I would advise people to do is take a look at every brand of every product that you buy, especially products that you buy on a regular basis. Toothpaste, cereal, soap, whatever it might be. And look at the different brands for each of those products. If you're buying toothpaste, does it have to be a particular brand, or should it be what it does? Like maybe you prefer whitening toothpaste, or you want it to be peppermint, or you want it to be anti-plaque or anti-cavity or whatever it is, or you have sensitive teeth. All different brands have comparable products. Go to the website of each of these companies. When you go to buy some shoes, does it have to be one brand over another, or does it need to be running shoes? Look at the different brands and see, do they have an environmental impact statement? Are they bragging about what they do for the environment? If they are, consider buying from them next time as opposed to who you currently are buying your products from. It goes beyond just what store you go to, it's what you put in your cart when you're at that store. The corporations that are not environmentally friendly or are not going out of their way to become so, they'll get the message really fast if people find out which brands are doing what they should and which brands are not, and they start spending that way. This is the one thing you can do right now that'll have the biggest impact, because these large corporations are going to do whatever it takes to keep their profits coming in, and if sales dry up, they'll get the message. So don't buy what's cheapest. Buy what's best for the environment. If you want to make something last longer, I mean, other things you can do, like stop using plastic bags, use the reusable bags, recycle what you can. Be more conservative, which means be less wasteful. You use less of each thing if you can. You can make things last a lot longer if you look for opportunities to. So if you buy a product that costs more, but you use it more sparingly, it'll actually last longer. This is what you can do right now. So I think it's important for people to understand just one solid step that they can take individually, personally, to have an impact on the long term, because every little thing is going to add up in terms of what our children, grandchildren, the future generations are going to have to deal with. So this concludes today's rant. Hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please click like below. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to do so underneath. Please subscribe, and I'll see you next time.